Jake Turner had never known rest. The clang of tools, the smell of oil, and the hum of old engines were all he had left. His life had been stripped of comfort and pride the day Miranda Cole, the CEO of Titan Motors, told him he was too slow, too simple, and too outdated for her visionary future. Those words burned in his memory every night. Still, Jake never stopped fixing things, even when life kept breaking him apart. He didn't know it yet, but fate had been tuning something far bigger than an engine. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when Jake's story took a turn. He was at the county hospital bringing food to a friend injured in a car accident. The corridors smelled of bleach and sorrow. As he walked past the emergency wing, he heard a nurse whisper to another, "She won't make it through the night unless we find a kidney donor." Blood type O, rare match. Jake froze. Something inside him stirred. A quiet pull, the kind of instinct that made him pick up a broken part and fix it without thinking. "Can I help?" he asked softly. The nurse blinked. "Do you know her?" He shook his head. "Does it matter?" They ran the tests, and by some miracle, he was a perfect match. Jake didn't ask for details, not her name, not her story. He only knew someone was dying, and he could do something about it. "If I can help someone live," he told the nurse, "that's all that matters." The paperwork was long, the process painful, but Jake didn't hesitate. Maybe it was guilt for all the years he'd felt invisible, or maybe it was something deeper. The belief that a man's worth isn't measured by what he owns, but by what he gives. Days later, the surgery began. He woke up in a haze of pain and beeping machines. His throat was dry, his vision blurred. The doctor smiled faintly. "You did it." The transplant was a success. Jake let out a tired sigh. "She's gonna make it?" "She's recovering well," the doctor replied. "You saved her life." Jake smiled weakly. "That's good enough for me." He didn't ask to see her. He didn't want praise or thanks. He had done what felt right, and that was all. But destiny wasn't done with him yet. 3 days later, as Jake sat by the window, watching the sunset through hospital blinds, a nurse knocked gently. "There's someone who wants to see you." Before he could respond, the door opened, and there she was. Miranda Cole, the billionaire CEO, the woman who had once crushed his livelihood with a single sentence. Her skin was pale, her eyes softer now. She stood in silence for a long time before whispering, "You're the donor." Jake blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. "You?" She nodded slowly. "I didn't know until this morning." He looked down at his hands, still trembling from weakness. "I guess life has a sense of humor." Miranda stepped closer, her voice breaking. "I fired you. I said you weren't good enough. And yet, you saved me." Jake shrugged faintly. "Didn't do it for you. Did it for whoever needed it." Tears welled in her eyes. For the first time in her life, Miranda Cole, the woman who built empires and broke men's spirits, had no words. She sat beside him, her hands shaking. "You gave me a second chance. Let me give you one too." A few weeks passed. Jake returned to his small garage, thinking life would return to normal. But one morning a convoy of luxury cars pulled up outside. Miranda stepped out, no longer in her usual armor of pride, but in a simple dress. Her team followed with paperwork and contracts. "I want you to come back," she said. "Not as a mechanic, as my lead engineer." Jake laughed softly. "Me? I'm just a small-town guy. You're the only one who ever fixed something without asking what's in it for you," she said. "That's the kind of person this company needs." He looked around at the dusty tools, the rusted cars, the empty walls. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to stop surviving and start building again. 6 months later, Titan Motors unveiled a new project, the Turner engine, a groundbreaking innovation named after the man who once swept floors in their factory. Reporters swarmed him, asking how he went from fired mechanic to engineering legend. Jake simply smiled. Sometimes the world looks down on people who use their hands instead of their heads. But real progress, he said, needs both. Miranda stood beside him on the stage, quiet, proud, and forever changed. That night, after the cameras were gone, Miranda joined him in the workshop where it had all begun. The hum of engines filled the air again, warm and alive. She turned to him and said softly, "You didn't just save my life, Jake. You reminded me what life should feel like." He smiled. Guess we both needed fixing. The two stood side by side, surrounded by machines and dreams, and for the first time in a long while, Jake Turner felt something he hadn't known since the day he was fired. Peace. Because sometimes the ones the world discards are the very ones who rebuild it. And sometimes the greatest repair a man can make isn't to an engine, but to another person's heart. Jake Turner's world had always been built around machines, things that could be taken apart, fixed and made whole again. But this time he wasn't fixing anything. He was the one being fixed. The faint hum of hospital monitors replaced the rattle of wrenches. The air smelled of antiseptic instead of motor oil. For the first time in years, Jake wasn't surrounded by engines or grease, but by silence. His body ached, but inside there was peace. The kind that comes only after doing something good without expecting anything in return. When the door opened, the doctor walked in with a smile that carried more warmth than words. "Your kidney saved her," he said softly. Jake blinked, still trying to focus through the haze of painkillers. "She made it?" he asked. The doctor nodded. "She's recovering well. She wants to meet you." Those simple words struck something deep inside him. He hadn't thought about the woman since the surgery. He didn't even know her name. To him, she was just a stranger whose life had been hanging by a thread he could help mend. Moments later, the door opened again. The sound of soft footsteps broke the quiet. Jake turned his head and froze. Standing there, pale and trembling, was Miranda Cole, the billionaire CEO who had fired him 2 years ago. Her hospital gown couldn't hide the fragility in her posture, nor the shock in her eyes. "You," she whispered, her voice cracking under disbelief. "You're the mechanic I fired." Jake just looked at her for a long moment, too tired to feel anger or pride. Then he gave a small, tired smile. "Guess life gave us both a second chance." His words hung in the air, simple, honest, and heavy with meaning. Miranda's lips trembled. For the first time, the woman who commanded boardrooms and built empires couldn't find anything to say. Her eyes shimmered as she stepped closer. "Why would you do this?" "After what I did to you." Jake shrugged lightly. "You needed help. That was enough." He didn't say it to make her feel guilty. It was just the truth. Miranda sat on the edge of his bed, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I fired you because I thought you were too slow, too small for the future I wanted. But you're the one who saved mine." Jake looked down at his rough, scarred hands. "I'm not special. I just do what I can." But Miranda shook her head. "You don't understand. You gave me something no one ever has, kindness without condition." Days passed. As they both recovered, their rooms became a quiet sanctuary, a place where two broken lives slowly began to mend. Miranda often visited, bringing coffee or just sitting beside him while the world outside rushed on. She told him about her empire, her constant battles for control, the loneliness that came with power. Jake listened quietly, not judging, just understanding. He told her about his small garage, about nights when he couldn't pay the bills, and how he'd still fix cars for free if someone was desperate. They came from different worlds, but for the first time, those worlds met in gratitude, humility, and respect. When they were both strong enough to leave, Miranda called him into her office, the same room where she had once told him he wasn't good enough. But now, the tone was different. The walls were the same, but her eyes were not. "Jake," she said quietly, "you gave me my life. Let me give you yours back." He frowned slightly. "I don't need anything." "Yes, you do," she replied gently. "A fair chance." She slid a folder across the desk, an employment contract. "Head engineer," it read. Jake blinked in disbelief. "Miranda, I'm just a mechanic." "You're not just anything," she interrupted. "You have something I've never been able to buy. Heart. You see value where others see nothing. You fix things no one else can. That's what this company needs." Reluctantly, he accepted. And for the first time in years, he walked back into the Titan Motors factory, but this time not as a nameless worker. His old colleagues watched as the man once fired returned with quiet dignity and new authority. He didn't brag or boast. Instead, he treated everyone with the same respect he wished he'd received years ago. And slowly, the factory changed. Under Jake's leadership, morale grew. Workers smiled again. Mistakes became lessons, not punishments. Miranda visited the floor often, no longer looking down from glass offices, but walking among her people. She had changed, and everyone could feel it. Months later, Titan Motors unveiled their newest innovation, the Turner engine. Reporters gathered, cameras flashed, and Miranda stood beside Jake on stage. When they asked her who designed it, she smiled. "It was built by the man I once underestimated," she said. "He reminded me that brilliance isn't born from power or money. It's born from purpose." The applause that followed wasn't for the machine. It was for the man who had given his heart, quite literally, to another human being. Jake stood humbly, his cap in hand, overwhelmed by the moment. After the event, Miranda found him in the workshop, tightening bolts on an old engine. "You could be anywhere in the world right now," she said softly. "Why stay here?" He smiled without looking up. "Because this is where I belong. I fix things, that's who I am." She stepped closer, her voice gentle. "You fix more than machines, Jake. You fixed me." He looked at her finally, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "Guess we both needed repair." That night, as the city lights glowed outside, Miranda and Jake stood side by side, watching the hum of engines that now carried their shared story. Two souls from opposite ends of life, one rich in money, the other rich in heart, both transformed by an act of selfless humanity. Jake had lost everything once, but by giving away a part of himself, he had gained something far greater, a purpose, a partner in spirit, and a legacy that would outlast them both. Because sometimes the most powerful hands are not the ones that build empires, but the ones that give without asking why.